Welcome to the Vault of Lost Tales. Settle in and enjoy the story. Welcome to the Vault of Lost Tales. I'm Desi, and today I'm sharing Marilee, a historical novel from the Sunfire series that many readers grew up with loving in the late 80s, early 90s. And while I can't display the book's text or images due to copyright, I do have permission from the author's estate to present a non-dramatic reading. Now, this is about preserving stories that I feel are too important to be forgotten. If you find them speaking too slow or too fast, please click on the settings icon in the upper corner. There you can change the playback speed, the faster or slower. So let's begin. Thank you for joining me. Marilee, Chapter 5. The pride of Gravesend had been a cradle. The ebb and flow of the great ocean's waves had been a lullaby. All this Marilee realized as she lay in the slender bed across the room from Hannah and tried to find sleep in her brother's house. For a long time after she lay down on the bed, she could hear the hum of conversation beyond the wall. Matthew's deep, rumbling voice and Abigail's higher tones. The wind in the giant trees around the fort keened as if in sorrow. Night birds called dolefully. From somewhere far off, some animal howled at the moon. Then, just as Marilee's eyelids would close in sleep, the guards would march by in their hourly patrol of the fort, startling her awake once more. What sleep finally came was fitful and swiftly banished by the first birds of morning. Marilee lay and laughed quietly to herself at the raucous singing. The birds of the New World, she decided, were convinced that all their fellow creatures had been struck with the deafness and would only hear what they trilled at the top of their lungs. Oh, for an English wren, swift and brown, piping quietly in a flowery hedge. Pulling her comforter around her, Marilee sat up in bed to watch the daylight leak slowly through the strips of the shutters on the window. As ready as Marilee was for the day to come, she dreaded facing her sister-in-law Abigail again. Had she done something offensive during that delicious supper? If not she, then who had offended Matthew's wife and sent her into that rude and uncivil pout? And having gone to bed in such a vicious mood, how would Abigail awaken? The answer to this last question came in a pleasant clattering of pans and scrapes of song trilled carelessly, as if there were only punctuation points between someone's happy thoughts. A rooster crowed and then another, making morning suddenly official. With her face splashed with icy water from the pitcher and her hair caught into some kind of shape, Marilee crept from the room, holding the wooden door with both hands for fear of rousing Hannah, who still snored heavily across the room. She was making her way to the kitchen through the unfamiliar rooms when Abigail appeared in the doorway, her song dying on her lips. "You startled me," she said, smiling at Marilee. Could this girl have any idea how startling her own friendly smile was? "What a glorious thing it must be to awaken singing," Marilee told her, weak with relief at Abigail's cordial manner. She made a little face that was absolutely charming. "I do love morning," she said, "and quite forget that not all people do." "Oh, but I do too," Marilee breathed. "Is there something I can do to help?" The hearth was glowing with a fresh log, and a kettle already steamed there. Abigail frowned around the room and shook her head. "If you are good at slicing bread, you might do that," she suggested. "I make it go off at such a crazy angle that it must be straightened every other slice." "Matthew likes a lot of buttered bread with cold meat and mustard in the morning." She made that face again. "For myself, I have jam with my bread and hot milk with a little sugar and cinnamon." No wonder Philip's gift of the sugar loaf had been so welcome, Marilee thought. Back in England, she had been told that no foodstuff was as hard to come by in America as sugar and fine white flour. "The girl is not here then?" Marilee asked. "The one who cleared the kitchen last night?" Abigail shook her head. "Her name is Suki. She comes after the milking and only stays for the day." Abigail smiled, flashing that wonderful dimple. "I'm no better at making butter and cheese than I am at baking bread or slicing it. Usually Suki's bread is quite good. Is that loaf all right?" She peered at the loaf under Marilee's hand with a worried look. "It looks beautiful," Marilee told her, "finer and lighter than mine by a good deal." Within minutes, Matthew joined them. His bulk made the room seem suddenly small. His well-shaped face was tanned from the sun, and his hair shone in the morning light. Marilee dropped her eyes to hide the pride she felt in the handsome man who was her brother. Matthew's high spirits and Abigail's continued warmth made breakfast delightful, since Hannah did not bring her complaints until they were nearly through eating. Nothing was said about the unpleasantness of the night before. In fact, Matthew spoke only of the coming day. "You must have plans for your first day in Virginia," he asked Marilee. "I should unpack, of course," she admitted, "but I'm terribly excited about exploring your village." Abigail giggled, a sound as delicious as her scraps of song had been. "Don't let anyone hear you call this a village. They think of it as a city. James City, they call it." Marilee's eyes sought her brother's, and he laughed too, then nodded. "By all means, you should take the time to look around. Hannah can unpack the trunks." At Hannah's groan, the obvious pain, he added hastily, "Or they can wait. You could walk with Matthew when he leaves," Abigail suggested. "There's nothing to do here that Suki won't get to." The sunshine was glorious in the crisp, cold air. Marilee watched Timothy Reeves lead her brother's saddled horse. Matthew dropped a swift kiss on her hair before he swung into his saddle. "Remember that you must not go outside the gates of the fort," he told her. Strangely, he seemed to be speaking to Timothy Reeves as much as he was to her when he said this. But at least Timothy seemed to be in no mood to mock her this morning. Instead, his handsome face was dark, as if with anger, and his lips were held in a tight, closed line as he handed his master the horse's reins. Perhaps his moods were the reverse of his mistress's, as if she cared. Marilee felt curious glances following her. For the most part, the people of the streets were busy on their own errands, and gave her only a duck of a nod and mumbled "Good mornin'." She watched a stout girl milking a brindle cow and chuckled at a flock of chickens who had left a pile of corn to chase a hen. She was startled to see several Indians among the people on the street. She tried very hard not to stare, but found herself glancing at them again and again. She had never seen any Indian in real life, only a picture of the Princess Pocahontas. She was amazed to find them such handsome people, tall, with swarthy skin and fine, clear eyes, unlike the princess who had been shown wearing a proper hat and a broad ruff in the style of Queen Elizabeth. These people dressed in tan leather, with more of their flesh bare than she could look at without an embarrassed glance away. She had walked the length of the fort and was turning back when a small, sturdy figure darted out of nowhere. He could not have been more than 3 or 4 years old. He was running without shoes in a short, full smock and waving this way and that as if demons were behind him. Someone was shouting at him. "Willie," she heard. Then, "Willie, come back here." Then a clear cry for help. "Catch him." At this, Marilee leaned over and snagged the little creature as he flew past her. He did not so much as look up to see who had him. Instead, he continued to run there in the air, his soiled stocking feet pumping in a wild circle as his fists pummeled at her to set him free. The woman who had called out heaved to a stop beside Marilee, panting and gasping for breath. She was the grown-up, womanly model of the child that Marilee was holding gingerly at arm's length. Her broad face, tawny hair, and a splatter of freckles across a turned-up nose made her quite the happiest-looking girl Marilee had ever seen. She was as awkward as the boy was agile. As she was obviously expecting another child, she leaned over her billowing apron to take the boy from Marilee's grasp. Then, letting him dangle in her grip, she smiled broadly at Marilee from a face scarlet from running. Even so, the smile she gave Marilee was like sunshine on a fresh garden. "You have to be Matthew's sister," she announced. "You can be no other." She shifted the child from her right hand to her left and wiped her palm on her apron before offering it to Marilee. "Deborah Yarrow, that's me." "My goodness, but you are a long time coming. Matthew was blinded himself watching for your sail upon the river. Did you go by the Indies?" Marilee laughed. "Just around a few icebergs. It is good to be here, and I'm happy to meet you, Mistress Yarrow." "Deborah," the woman corrected her. "And this is Willie, for all the good it does the world." She smiled as if she spoke to soften the harshness of that judgment. "Barefoot Willie," she added, looking down at him. Then her face turned suddenly wistful. "How good it is to meet you after all this time. If you no other plans, I'd be happy if you would come and sit with Willie and me. I would offer you a biscuit and some cider." Marilee felt something leap within her. Was it possible that she would find a friend here so swiftly? Someone near her own age that she would be comfortable with, as she had been with her good friends back in England? Deborah Yarrow's face, as she smiled at Marilee, was so promising of quick, dancing words and laughter that Marilee leaped into the suggestion. "I'm fresh from breakfast," Marilee admitted, "but yes, I'd love to come." Deborah's house was unlike Matthew's. On the inside, it was identical on the outside. No polished pewter shone from the shelves, nor did the rushes on the floor breathe perfume. Instead, this house shouted family from the rude gun rack inside the door up to the hall, and playthings scattered on the rushes of the kitchen floor. A round, yellow cat sleeping on a sunny window turned and stared at Marilee for only a moment before tucking back into sleep. I have no tea given its price, Deborah told Marilee. William and I make do with sassafras. Have you tried it? When Marilee shook her head, Deborah poured them each a mug and set a tray of sweet biscuits between them. Marilee was savoring the rich perfume that rose from the steam from her cup when a knock came at the door. Deborah groaned as she labored to her feet. I don't mind eating for two, she told Marilee as she moved toward the door. It's moving for two that keeps me panting. From where she sat, Marilee could see the sunlight beyond the door. In it, towering over Deborah with his dark curls shining, stood Timothy Reeves. Marilee looked away quickly, hoping that he wouldn't see her, and whatever brought him to the door would not disturb this wonderful chance to get to know Deborah. Her hopes seemed justified when Deborah came back once again and let herself down into the bench with a groan. You had the young man worried, disappearing like that, she told Marilee, but someone reported seeing you wrestling with young Willie here. Marilee stared at her in amazement. What does he think he is, my nursemaid? She asked. Deborah shrugged. He will do only what Matthew tells him. Your brother is probably concerned about you until you learn what dangers there are. Dangers, Marilee repeated, smiling. That's all I've had poured into my ears about this place. An officer aboard our ship, Philip. Deborah could not even let her finish, but leaned toward Marilee with a wide smile. Philip Soames, of course. I heard he was on the Pride of Gravesend and had forgotten. How is Philip? In good health, I hope, and in fine spirit? Well, I'm in good spirit, Marilee assured her. My goodness, I think that everyone knows everyone else in this place. Deborah laughed and pushed the tray of cookies away from young Willie's hand, which was groping blindly for them from the edge of the table. Philip was on the Marmaduke, the ship in which I made the crossing. I and the other women, like your brother's wife, were paid for by the Earl of Southampton. I really didn't know anything about all that, Marilee admitted. Then you and Abigail came over here together? Deborah nodded. An even dozen of us, like fine eggs, one widow and the rest of us unmarried. We were all young and lively, with husbands to choose like buying a ribbon at a fair. But during that passage, some foul weather or fair, Philip Soames was friend and comfort, even as he was to me on the Pride, Marilee thought to herself. A moment of carelessness on Deborah's part had netted young Willie a handful of cookies from the overturned plate. He sped to the corner of the room with his treasure and settled into devouring them with a watchful eye on his mother. He need not have worried. Deborah, drawn out by Marilee's honest interest, gazed off unseen as she described her own trip to Virginia. God only knows what would have come of me if the Earl had not decided to put up the money for the lot of us. With my mother and father dead of the fever, there was no one who wanted me. They inspected us, We had to be healthy, of good character, and have a reasonable education. Of course, the good Earl got his money back in the end. For each of us, the husband had to pay 120 pounds of first quality tobacco. She flashed a smile at Marilee. Sometimes I tease my William and ask how good a bargain I was at such a price. He has yet to ask for that tobacco back. But when you're here, what happened? Marilee pressed. Did they just pass you around like a plate of biscuits? Oh, no, Deborah said, shocked at the idea. We went into the homes of the married planters and were treated like their daughters. While we were courted and won, we could turn down any suitor we pleased for whatever reason we had. I turned down no one. One look at William, and I knew why I'd come. It was then that Deborah said something that caught strangely in Marilee's mind. So strangely, she did not even pursue the subject anymore. I'm eager to meet this William of yours, Deborah, she told her new friend. He will want to meet you too, Marilee. Deborah paused. But as a matter of fact, it will be better if you are here a while before the two of you meet. William is not the man I would have chosen if I had stayed in Sussex, nor is he the man I would have wed if I had lived in London. But I knew where I was, thank God, and chose a husband for Virginia and no other life. It was me who got the bargain for the load of fine tobacco. Marilee yearned to ask her new friend about Abigail, if she had turned down many suitors while choosing Matthew, or if, like Deborah and William, theirs had been love at first sight. But not only did Marilee not want to be branded as a disloyal gossip on her first day, but she also sensed some hesitation in Deborah where Abigail was concerned. After all, she had not even been called by her name, but referred to only as your brother's wife. Yet she had called Philip Soames by his first name in that relaxed, familiar way that Marilee herself had begun to do at once. That's a fascinating story, Marilee told her, rising. I feel as if I'm wasting your day. I can't thank you enough. I should be the one to say thanks, Deborah told her, raising to lay an affectionate hand on Marilee's arm. I have been to London and back in my mind as we talked. She smiled at Marilee. I was even young and fair there in my mind for those few minutes. My whole day will go happily. Marilee slid her hand into her apron pocket and felt the glowing surface of the scrimshaw tooth Philip had given her. Let me show you something beautiful, she told Deborah, pulling it out. Deborah squinted at the fine etching before taking it to the window, where there was full light. She shook her head, held the smooth ivory trinket in her palm, and turned back to Marilee. What a wonder to hold the great city in your hand. Where did you get such a treasure? Philip Soames brought it to me last night, Marilee explained. Deborah's eyes narrowed, and she frowned. And what did Matthew's wife say to this? Matthew could not meet her host's eyes. Very little, I think, she replied. Little Willie came flying across the room that moment they walked toward the door. Deborah made a gate of her legs at the door to prevent him from escaping into the busy street again. They made promises to meet again soon. Before Marilee stepped into the sun to go back to her brother's house, she had taken only a few steps before she saw a tall figure come from a nearby doorway and fall to step a few paces behind her. Timothy Reeves. When she stopped in her tracks, he did too. Then, whirling, she marched back to where she stood watching her approach with an expressionless face. Don't tell me that my brother has no better use for your services than to have you tag after me, she said. A fleeting anger darkened his face, but his voice came softly. Very well, I won't. Then stop doing it, she told him. His laugh was easy and comfortable. My dear Mistress Marilee, I didn't say that Master Matthew gave no such orders. I was simply obeying your request that I do not report on how much more useful I could be to my master in some other activity. She stared at him. This was no fool, as Michael Braden had said. If anything, he was quite too glib for his own good, and to be honest about it, he was funny. She chuckled in spite of herself. If we were sparring, I think you would have gained that round, she told him. When she began to walk again, he called after her. Shall we go together, or do you prefer me to tag along? That had been a bad way to express what she felt, she sighed. You're a most exasperating man, Timothy Reeves, she told him. Come and walk with me this one time, but I intend to have a talk with Matthew about all this. The morning was more than half gone. The full sun warmed Marilee's head as she laid back the hood of her mantle. A spicy sweetness like the breath of the sea moved in the air, and the birds beyond the fort had tired of their shouting and settled into song. Is 120 pounds tobacco worth a good deal of money? She asked him after a while. She felt his glance but didn't look up. Tobacco is the money of Virginia, he told her. 120 pounds of first-rate tobacco is a small fortune. Small, but a fortune nonetheless. Why do you ask? Mistress Yarrow was telling me about the woman brought over here by the Earl of Southampton, and I wondered if it seems a strange price for a wife. Some of them were strange wives, he said quietly. Since there were clearly more meaning in his words than his tone revealed, she glanced up at him. He had assumed an expression of comic innocence that almost brought another chuckle from her lip. She swallowed it hastily. The Virginia air has an ill effect on those who live here, she decided aloud. They are surly one moment and friendly the next, so that a person never knows what to expect. He nodded amicably. It affects those who were strangers the same way, turning them from pleasant human beings to haughty beasts in a breath. Perhaps one should always expect the worst. They were at her brother's door. She turned at his words. Had he dared to call her a haughty beast? That bland, pleasant expression somehow triggered her. Sudden anger. Clearly he was laughing at her. Those smoky eyes full on her face, all the things that came to her mind would be most unladylike to say. She refused to drop to his level of rudeness. She turned away angrily and slammed the door hard behind her, but not quickly enough. His mocking laughter followed her into the room. Abigail appeared in the doorway, startled by the sound. That soft, joyous look of the morning was gone from her face. Her voice, as she spoke, was harsh with displeasure. What on earth made you do that? Nothing really, Marilee told her, startled by the change in Abigail's manner since they parted at breakfast. At her reply, Abigail walked to the window and looked out. Then she shrugged, turning away. That Timothy Reeves. Never mind. He has ached for some putting down for a long time. Believe me, he will get it. Abigail turned and switched away toward the back of the house. Marilee stared after her thoughtfully. She had heard practically the same words said before about Timothy Reeves. Before she could remember the circumstance, she heard Hannah calling plaintively from the bedroom they shared. Marilee groaned. For being seasick for an entire 4 months, was it possible that now this woman was land sick? Chapter 6. The Pride of Gravesend was to hang at the anchor in Jamestown harbor for a full fortnight. Measured in days, 2 weeks did not sound like a very long time. In fact, because the departure of the ship would take away her friend, Philip Soames, Marilee had first viewed these 14 days as a painfully brief period. Yet the conditions in her brother's house were so uncomfortable that Marilee began to feel that she was living these days an hour at a time, with each hour managing to add an extra weight to the heaviness of her heart. Hannah's endless complaints have been parlayed into a mysterious illness that made her a hopeless burden on Marilee and the household. After snoring through the night like some great beast on a rampage, Hannah would rise and report to Abigail that she had not closed my eyes for more than a minute, given such a pain. When Marilee mildly protested this exaggeration, she was labeled a cruel and heartless girl. Since Hannah spent the whole of the day drinking tea and groaning, the unpacking remained untouched except for the clothes that Marilee needed and unpacked herself to store in the wall cabinet. Since 2 extra people obviously added to the household task, it was Marilee who swept, labored over the butter churn to free Suki from other tasks and did the marketing. Marilee welcomed this last duty because it took her out of the house into the fresh morning air. When she put on her bonnet and hooked a basket over her arm, she could at least escape Hannah's wailing and Abigail's surly silences. Letting herself into the busy streets of the little village always brought a lift to her spirits. With only a couple of days, she had become known to each, to be greeted warmly by all the regulars of the town, and had begun to recognize certain planters and their wives who came to the fort from their outlying plantations. Marilee had her favorites. The woman who ran the dairy was a sharp-eyed girl in her late 20s named Maggie. Maggie had the clear, unblemished skin of a milkmaid and the head of hair like a tangled straw. The first time Marilee paused to smile at her, Maggie had fixed her with a baleful stare. Since the woman had no cause for this rudeness, Marilee returned her gaze boldly and said, "Good morning, Mistress Maggie." The milkmaid snorted. "It's well enough for you to call it a good morning. For myself, all mornings are the same. Light in the east and milk in the pail." Maggie chuckled in spite of herself. "I cannot argue that things could be worse. The light could come from the west and the pail stand empty." The girl looked at her sharply. "Then at least I could be free to wander around the streets leading a parade of idle men like some women I know." "Idle men," Marilee repeated, looking around. Sure enough, a few yards behind her, Timothy Reed, his face dark with a scowl, watched as Michael Braden strode briskly toward the stable where Marilee stood. "Perhaps he comes to see you," Marilee suggested softly. Maggie glanced up, her face split in a wide grin, and she laughed heartily. "Not that one," she said with a promise. "We have already dueled with our tongues, and he carries scars." Then she turned back to her work, sending fresh singing streams of milk into the pail. As always, Marilee was startled by Michael's astounding good looks. His vest of sea green silk changed to shades of blue as he moved. The linen at his throat was the color of a pearl, and his fair hair seemed the same shade as the sunlight. "Ah, Mistress Marilee," he said, amazingly able to ignore the great cow and the girl on the stool as if they were not there. "I came to look for you. The fishermen have brought in a giant of a sturgeon on the beach. I thought you might relish seeing such a wonder." Before she could reply, Timothy Reeves stepped forward. "Mistress Marilee is not to leave the fort." Michael Braden sighed, staring at Timothy. "Must we repeat this ridiculous drill every time I speak to your mistress?" he asked tiredly. "Go about your idleness somewhere else and leave us in peace. You don't see other great louts like yourself nothing more than leaning against fences, do you?" Marilee knew she should speak up quickly and try to prevent another explosion between Matthew's servant and his friend. She was not quick enough. Timothy's voice was soft with mock respect. "Only yourself, sir," he replied. The stream of milk stopped. Maggie sat perfectly still for a moment before collapsing into roaring laughter. The cow, confused by this, turned to stare at Michael and Timothy with bulging brown eyes. Michael did not show his fury like ordinary men. He paled instead of reddening, and his eyes narrowed to slender lines rimmed by dark lashes. Although he made no move toward Timothy, the very straightness of his back was threatening. "Timothy Reeves," he warned quietly, "your day is coming." Maggie, who was wiping the tears of laughter from her eyes, nodded vigorously. "That'll be the day the sun dawns in the west, mistress," she told Marilee, Marilee, gasping for breath from her outburst. Michael Braden turned his eyes to Marilee and spoke calmly. I clearly need to straighten this all out with your brother. In the meantime, surely there is somewhere I can escort you where the company is more suitable to your station. Since the situation could only get worse, Marilee nodded. I was thinking of stopping to see my friend Deborah Yarrow, she told him. He nodded, offered her his arm, and they set off. He said nothing of the scene just past. Instead, like a gentleman at a weekend party in England, he made casual conversation, asking her opinion on various questions, turning to study her eyes again and again, always with a gentle admiration at his glance. At Deborah's door, he paused. Dear Mistress Marilee, he said, while it seems our fate to have unpleasantness sprung up around us, still, I wouldn't give up my moments with you even at that price. You have grown dear to me very swiftly. Marilee felt herself flush, and she struggled to find some response to this astonishing statement. It was not necessary. Even as Deborah, who had seen her coming through the window, opened the door to her, Michael had turned and was gone. Although it weighed heavily on her mind, Marilee did not tell Deborah of the scene between Michael and Timothy. Instead, she spoke of Maggie and what an interesting girl she was. Interesting, Deborah said, laughing. Interesting, Deborah said, laughing. That is a mild word. Dear Maggie has a tongue like a coachman's whip. No man in the village dares cross her for fear of what she might shout at him. Yet when left with her animals, she's as genial as a child. I have heard her singing softly to those beasts in a voice that the birds in the trees might envy. Has she no husband? Marilee asked. Widowed, Deborah told her, setting a steaming cup of sassafras tea before her guest. Her Jonathan died of summer fever their first year, leaving her 3 things, those 2 cows and a broken heart. It's a wonder she hasn't married again, Marilee mused. Many men have sought her in vain. She is that rare woman whose love survived death. While there are no more great scenes between Michael and Timothy, it was a rare day that Marilee did not encounter Michael in the village street and fall into conversation with him. She looked forward to those times, even though, as they talked, Timothy always stood a few paces away, watching with that angry face. Yet when she and Timothy actually talked, she found herself liking him more than she meant to. He was clever and made wonderfully funny remarks that brought back that instant laughter of her olden days. He knew everyone and was wiser about the colony than anyone she knew. It was Timothy who pointed out to her the young Indian man named Chanko, who was often in the village and seemed a favorite with everyone. He is the living proof of how it should be between our people and his, Timothy told her. While he is a servant of a man named Mr. Perry, he had been befriended by Mr. Pace. Chanko is our friend, and we are his. Yet in spite of how much she sometimes enjoyed Timothy's company, having him follow her everywhere made her feel like either a helpless child or a thief. Even the nature of Virginia society warred against her. From the first day of her arrival, she had been sought after by every wife-hunting planter along the river. Matthew, to whom she might have turned to her distress, was gone from dawn to dark in the neighborly service of building a house and barns for a newly married friend. When he was at home, Abigail was always hanging on to him so that Marilee could never exchange a private word with him. Philip was there one Sunday, and that time brought about such a wonderful experience that it stood out like a beacon in Marilee's mind. The suggestion had come from Philip during a Saturday night card game. Have you seen your own Virginia land yet? Philip asked Marilee. Matthew spoke up as she shook her head. I feel dreadful about that, Philip. There simply hasn't been time. As soon as I finish this work I'm doing at Martin's 100, I make that trip with Marilee. He smiled. It's such a fine stretch of land, too. I'm proud of my choice for her. Philip stared unseen at his cards, then looked up. I have it. A great idea, surely. You don't plan to work on the Sabbath. I could put together a lunch from the ship's stores, meat and bread and some ale to chill in the river. We could take a boat and have the first meal on Marilee's own plantation. What a wonderful idea, Matthew said. We could leave after chapel and be home by dusk. Doesn't that sound great, love? Abigail dimpled at him and from behind her cards, which were fanned in front of her face. Matthew, for heaven's sake, have you forgotten that I am the girl who does not like the wind messing her hair, nor the filthy river water soiling her clothes? But go and have your unpleasant excursion. Hannah and I will be comfortable here while you are gone. Oh, Philip said, instantly contrite. I have no intention of taking your husband from you. It wasn't a good idea after all. Of course it was, she replied. Then smiling at Matthew, she added, as for taking my husband from me, no one could do that, but you may borrow him for the day. And such a day it was, crisp and cool, but with enough sun to cast great tree shadows on the face of the river. The 4 of them rowed upstream, laughing and singing like children on a holiday. Matthew and Timothy Reeves worked the oars, insisting that Philip, being an ocean man and not a river man, would not be able to handle the work. There were a few buildings to be seen from the river. These were hidden behind wooden palisades, but always had a beaten path that led to a dock or a crude tying post at the edge of the river. "The James is Virginia's high road," Matthew commented. "Sometimes I wonder if there will ever be such a busy road running up the land. If it comes, it will only pass the back doors of the houses," Philip laughed. "Or like the houses along the Thames, the designers will have to plan two views, a river view and a land view." Timothy pulled the boat ashore at a spot that looked no different from all the woods they had passed. Yet the moment Marilee stepped onto the narrow beach, she felt a wonderful shiver of excitement. Her land. This was her very own land to till and harvest and cherish. Matthew had been watching her face. "Nothing like that, is there, Marilee?" he asked. "I will never forget the thrill of feeling my own land under my feet for the first time. But come, let me show you what was been done here." There was no sign of a building from the river view. They followed a path that had been hacked through the woods up a small hill. A band of hogs rooting in the mulch under an oak tree were startled by their coming and ran squealing and grunting off into the woods. "Yours, Matthew," told Marilee, smiling. "It's required that a habitation be built and the land be stocked, and thanks to the richness of the acorn crop and the abundance of water, hogs provide their own care." At the bend of the path, he raised his hand. "Now listen." In the stillness came the faint musical sound of falling water. He stepped to the left and motioned Marilee to follow. The house was nothing, a single room with a chimney of rude clay, but from this point a break in the trees gave a view of the river. To the right of the cabin a small stream tumbled over gray rocks downhill toward the river. Marilee was delighted past words. Beautiful, oh beautiful was all she could say. When they drifted back downriver after their lunch, Marilee felt that she had moved in a dream, the song of that stream musical in her mind. How grateful she was to Philip for his wonderful idea. How grateful she was to Matthew for finding and securing such a place of beauty for her. Unfortunately, having seen her beautiful land, Marilee was even more disgusted with the eagerness of the suitors who continued to come by and try to woo her. When one of the suitors, a thick-bodied widower with a house full of young children, asked Matthew's permission to court her in marriage, Marilee told him no with a great deal of emphasis. Since she never got a real chance to talk to Matthew, she exploded to Deborah about this ridiculous suitor. "That man doesn't know me. Why would he court a woman he knows nothing about? I could be a shrew with a lively temper. I could be lazy or know nothing about housekeeping. He would be buying, as the old saying goes, a pig in a poke." Deborah laughed. "Perhaps the love he has for you is tobacco fever. You must realize that upon coming here you got 2 head rights of land, one for yourself and one for bringing Hannah. He does not see your sparkling eyes and growing hair, my dear. He sees neat rows of tobacco growing money on your land and a housekeeper to tend that small army of children." "That is truly blind love," Marilee said angrily. "I would rather be Maggie's leaning against a cow's side for warmth than wed to such a man." In her quiet moments of thought, Marilee found marriage appealing for the single reason that her life in her brother's house was so acutely uncomfortable. Abigail's wide and unpredictable mood swings kept Marilee afraid to open her mouth, lest she fear furious accusations from the same lips that had smiled at her warmly the moment before. Aside from her morning walks in the village, Marilee's one steady source of pleasure was Philip Soame. Each evening, when the ship's work was finished, he came to call. Sometimes when they walked the streets of the village together, Marilee wished that the hours would never end. Philip, having learned during the passage how she loved poetry, would quote snatches of his favorites to her as they walked. Sometimes the thready music of a spinet would spill into the street from behind closed doors. For a few moments, Marilee could imagine herself back at home in England, instead of walled behind the high fence of a fort in the wilderness. Sometimes her brother returned early enough from Martin's Hundred so that she and Philip could join Matthew and Abigail at playing cards. Philip and Matthew bantered steadily through these matches, and Abigail sparkled with beauty and vivacity, which, like her approval, came and went like shadows under a clouded sky. While it never occurred to Marilee to burden Philip with complaints about her unhappiness, he eased it during those hours with his gentle wit and thoughtful attentions. Sometimes, when Marilee was with Deborah and her son Willie, she had to bite her lip to keep from talking steadily about Philip Soames. Whenever his name came up, Deborah had a strange expression on her face that she could not or would not explain, and Of course, Marilee's loyalty to Matthew sealed her lips about the joylessness of her life in his home. After a few days before the sailing, a morning came that brought more anguish than Marilee could carry. The moment Matthew was out of the door, Abigail turned on her fury about her treatment of poor Hannah. Forced from the house by this tirade, she encountered Michael Braden in the street, and he and Timothy Reeves squared off in one of those dreadful insult matches. She fled from the street to Deborah's kitchen, where she broke down without warning, lay her head on her arms on Deborah's table, and began to weep bitterly. "What will I do?" she cried. "What will I ever do when Philip Soames is gone from this place?" Deborah stared at her open mouth. "What is this?" she asked. "Are you in love with Philip?" "Oh, no," Marilee corrected her quickly. "It's that he's kind to me, and his good company brightens a bitter day for me." "A bitter day," Deborah repeated thoughtfully. "Explain that to me." "I simply have not adjusted yet," Marilee said, already sorry she had broken down like that in front of anyone. "Please forgive me." She fished a dainty handkerchief from her pocket to wipe her nose. "You're as bad as Willie," Deborah fussed, handing her an ample handkerchief. "Now blow and have it be done with." Marilee blew lustily and smiled at her friend. "Explain," Deborah ordered. "But I hate to sound disloyal and ungrateful," Marilee protested. "After all, my brother and his wife have graciously taken me into their home. There's a time for gratitude and another for being honest and fair to yourself," Deborah told her. "People and tea kettles are the same in that they become dangerous to themselves if they build up too much steam without spouting off." "Hannah's driving me crazy," Marilee blurted out. "She has never been much of a worker. But since she was with me when Mother died, Father kept her on. He and I have managed her all these years by ignoring all her endless complaints and keeping a firm hold on her. All that control is gone. Between groans, she is lazy and impertinent to me. It is absolutely infuriating." Once the flood began, Marilee had no way to stop her catalog of problems, and that Timothy Reeves is forever tagging at my heels. If I say as much as a word to him about it, he reminds me that it is no wish of his, but rather Matthew's desire. Everything I say, he turns back at me. I cannot have a conversation in the street without his drawing ear to listen. He made Michael Braden so angry a day ago, I feared that Michael Braden would take a whip to him. He hates me as roundly as I hate him, and even that he has the advantage. He could always go away and leave me alone. I haven't had that luxury. And furthermore, Marilee went on so hotly that little Willie, who had the terrified cat trapped in the corner, turned to stare at her, giving the animal a chance to escape. I am deathly afraid of Abigail's changing moods. She goes from dimpling and singing to harsh words without warning. It's like living on thin ice above a swift river. "Now come, there must be some pattern to these moods," Deborah said mildly. "Well, some perhaps. She was always gay and light during breakfast. She likes the morning, and she likes guests. When Michael Braden or Philip are there, honey would not melt in her mouth. By evening, all her mean words are spent by the time she greets Matthew with a loving smile. Could we say then, for the sake of argument, that Abigail is a different woman in the company of men?" The words were so delicately spoken that only as Marilee thought them over did she realize what a dreadful suggestion Deborah had made. When Marilee didn't reply at once, Deborah went on. "About Hannah, what has encouraged her to leave off all her labors and only enjoy her illness?" "It isn't a matter of encouragement," Marilee protested. "Abigail actually believes her, fusses over her, and strokes her painful arms or whenever the day's agony has struck. Then Abigail tells Matthew in pity tones how tragic it is to be like Hannah, a poor, frailless old thing in great pain. And what does Matthew say to this? What can he say when he doesn't know the truth? I hate to start his day with an argument, but when he's leaving for that hard work at Martin's 100, the one day I did try to speak of him, he gave me a great lecture. He said he had been surprised to learn that I was so cruel and hard-hearted to the old woman, and that he expected better of me." At this memory, Marilee's tears began afresh. Deborah sat sullenly watching her. Then she rose and went to the hearth, where she poked furiously at a log that had been burning merrily without this interference. "Now listen to me, Marilee Fordham. One would think that your head had turned to porridge on the crossing. You have listed a great number of problems. You do not have a great number of problems. You have one single problem, and it is that sister-in-law of yours. She is the one who has made your own servant useless to you by babying her. She is taking out her natural meanness on you whenever there isn't a man around to see what a shrew she really is. And, as if that wasn't enough, she is twisting the poor Matthew's head so that he has no idea what is happening. How can he know when you do nothing to defend yourself? As for Timothy Reeves, poor man, he worships Matthew, as does everyone who knows him well. He is resentful of you for keeping him from Matthew's side. That is the whole of that. He suffers, therefore he makes you suffer too. Childish, but natural enough." Marilee caught her lip in her teeth and stared at Deborah. Even if you are right, and I'm not saying that you are, what can I do? Deborah shrugged. Some women marry. So soon after my father's death, Marilee asked, shocked at this suggestion. Deborah laughed heartily. Virginia is unlike England in that regard, too. It is common here for the second husband to settle the estate of the first for the freshly wedded widow. Wives here have worn their funeral gowns to their own weddings without the grace of being single overnight. That's absolutely shocking, Marilee said, rising. So is the treatment you receive in your brother's house. There is something I must say to you that I never want you to forget. There is never a time in this house is tidy or the dishes clean all at once, but there is always a bed and a place at her table for you, Marilee Fordham, and you are not to forget that. Marilee burst into sudden tears and clung to her friend. What a goose I am, she told Deborah. I cry when I think I am badly treated, only to weep even harder when I am treated as royalty as you do to me. You are not a person to shed idle tears, Deborah reminded her.